Tokays are some of the friendliest.
Next time you fucking put a hand on me, I'ma fucking rip your face off, bitch.
I mean, coolest pet gecko you could possibly get. And they make great pets. So stick around, because today I'll be giving you guys a complete care guide so you can be ready to welcome this awesome species into your home. Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I'm not really asking anymore, I'm just gonna start demanding it. So go ahead and do that. But without further ado, guys, let's get into the care guide. The first category we'll be going over today is the enclosure size. I like to start with this because if you don't have the space to adequately house the animal, then the rest of this care guide is just irrelevant to you, right? If you don't have the space, you're just never gonna have one. So as hatchlings, these guys are born pretty small, and you can house them in something like a 12 by 12 by 18. However, that'll only be adequate for a few months at most, as these guys do tend to grow pretty quickly. Totodile here, I've had him for about 3 months, and he has literally quadrupled in size since I got him. Tokays are the second largest species of gecko in the world, capable of reaching up to 16 inches, though the average tends to be more like 10 to 12 inches, but still, that's freaking massive.
That's what she said.
That's my joke. Damn it, Dwight.
As far as enclosure size goes, some people will argue that an 18 by 18 by 24 is large enough. I completely disagree. I think at an absolute minimum, they should be kept in something like a 24 by 24 by 36. Again, guys, these are large geckos we are talking about, and that's just the minimum. Personally, I think if you can go larger, you should. They are pretty active species, and they will take advantage of any room that you do give them. Totodile is currently in a 36 by 24 by 36, which should be fine for the rest of his life. But if he ends up being, a large individual, then I have no problem, upgrading him to something even larger than that. Next, we're going to talk about temperature and humidity. So, like all geckos, or really reptiles for that matter, you're going to need to create a thermal gradient for them so that they can regulate their own body temperature and move to wherever is most comfortable. So you're going to do this by creating both a warm spot and a cooler spot in their enclosure. Depending on how your enclosure is set up, you can either have the warm spot on kind of like on one side and the cooler spot on another, or you can do it like how I'm doing it, and you can have the top of the enclosure be warmer and then have it gradually cool down as it gets to the bottom. The warm end of the enclosure should be anywhere from 82 to 90 degrees at most. The cooler end should be between 72 and 80 degrees. At nighttime, you're going to want to offer a night drop. Personally, I just turn off everything and just keep it at room temperature, which is about 72, 73. But honestly, anywhere from 70 to 75 is fine for nighttime. You just don't want it getting into the 60s. Obviously, if it's just for, a night or two, they're going to be fine. But you really do not want it consistently getting that cold at night. Tokays are a tropical species. That's why they're invasive here in Florida. So they do enjoy a good amount of humidity. During the day, the humidity is about 60 to 70%, and then at nighttime, it'll spike up to about 80 to 90%. It's really important to maintain adequate temperatures and humidity levels. This will help you prevent things like respiratory infections, lethargy, trouble digesting, stuck shed, etc. Next, we're going to talk about substrate, decor, and enrichment. If you are new to reptile keeping, substrate simply refers to the bedding on the bottom of your enclosure. Tokays do great in a fully bioactive setup, so of course that's what I'm going to be recommending. You're going to need to create a drainage layer. There's different ways to do this. What I do is I just have, at the very bottom, I have a layer of leca balls, however it's pronounced, it's whatever, leca. I'm gonna just roll with that. Followed by a screen mesh over that, followed by some charcoal, and then after that I actually have my actual substrate, which I'm using a mix of topsoil and sand. The ratio is about 70% soil, 30% sand, play sand, and of course it has a ton of isopods and springtails inside of it. As far as everything that's going to go inside of the enclosure, I think this is the first species that I do a care guide for that doesn't require a water bowl, which sounds kind of crazy, but they will drink most of their water from mistings if you are misting the enclosure often, and they will get it from their diet. However, adding a water bowl certainly does not hurt, as long as it's not too deep that they may drown or something like that. And it will help boost the humidity levels if that is something that you are struggling with. In any case, if you do add a water dish, you want to make sure that you thoroughly clean it and change out the water at least once per week. Something that you're going to want to add is live plants. Not only do they look beautiful, but they do seem to enjoy kind of just hanging out on them. And it's another thing that will help boost the humidity levels. Tokay geckos are arboreal, so they're going to feel most comfortable when they have a lot of things to climb. So add things like branches, sticks, cork bark, really anything that you can add that you think they will climb, just throw it in there. You'll also want to add different textures and smells for them to be mentally and physically stimulated. How I've done that, I've added a lot of leaf litter to the bottom of their enclosure. I've added stones, and I have added Spanish moss, which he seems to really enjoy. He tends to sleep in it, which is pretty cool. But yeah, guys, just make the enclosure as full, nice, and just really get creative and have fun with it, and just make their enclosure as awesome as possible. Next, we're going to talk about lighting. So like all living creatures, Tokay geckos are going to need a day and night cycle. Actually, a light. I don't think all living creatures need that. Like, I just thought about like creatures that live underground, or I don't know, at the bottom of the ocean, but sorry. Anyways, you guys get the point. I'll probably cut this part out unless, I don't know, I feel like just letting you guys into my head for a few seconds. But anyways, you will need to give them a day and night cycle. For me, I turn his lights on, well, the timer turns them on at 9 a.m. and they go off at 7 p.m. So he gets about 10 hours of light per day, and then 14 hours of darkness. But honestly, anywhere from 8 to 12 hours of light per day is good. So as far as how to light the enclosure, there's 3 main ways to do it. The first is if your heating element provides light. So if you're using something like a heat bulb or something like that that gives off light, that's one way to do it. Another way is through the use of LEDs. So something like for plants, or my god, his back feet are like really stuck on me. Like, I'm getting uncomfortable in being in this position and he just does not want to move. Sorry, LEDs are another way to light it. And then lastly, you can light through the use of UVB. As far as UVB, it's not absolutely required, but I do highly recommend it. If you do opt in for UVB, make sure to use a lower wattage UVB, as these are nocturnal animals, so in the wild they typically do not spend a lot of time under direct sunlight, which is another reason why you're going to want to kind of really deck out your enclosure and give it lots of hiding opportunities, so they have the choice to get away from the light, the UVB, whatever, if they so choose. Next, we're going to talk about diet. Tokay geckos are voracious feeders, guys. They will accept anything that you put in front of them. In the wild, they eat things like locusts, crickets, beetles, small lizards, spiders. They're even big enough that they actually eat rodents, birds, and small snakes, which is just super badass, in my opinion. They'll also even eat fruits and vegetables, though this is typically more of a last resort if, there's a scarcity of other food items. In captivity, a varied diet of insects and worms should be the staple. So things like crickets, dubia roaches, silkworms, hornworms, etc. should make up the bulk of their diet. However, you can offer them treats. So things like small rodents, scrambled eggs, and various fruits can be offered once or twice a month, just don't overdo it. You're also going to want to make sure that you gut load all of your feeder items so that your gecko can have the most nutrition as possible. And you're going to want to dust your feeders with calcium at least every other feeding. As far as how often to feed them, so you want to feed them every day until they are at least a year old, after which you can switch to feeding them about every 2 to 3 days. Lastly, you're going to want to make sure that you feed them at night, as that is when they are most active and that's when they'll be naturally hunting in the wild. Lastly, we're going to talk about temperament and handling. This is where Tokay geckos lose a lot of points for some people. They do have a pretty well-deserved reputation for being kind of feisty and aggressive. The good thing is that they will usually bark at you to let you know when they are really upset at you. And if you ignore this bark, they have no problem just biting you. Like, this isn't like those snakes that kind of like bluff at you and try to scare you and then you can just touch them and they won't do anything to you. These guys will bite you. In fact, he bit me before I even took him out for this video. But as you can see, once he's out, he is pretty calm. I have been trying to socialize him, and eventually I think it'll get to the point where I can just take him out and he won't even really like fight me on it. But for now, he still does not really like to be handled. I'm honestly not sure. I mean, he doesn't really seem to mind it, but it's definitely taking him out of the enclosure where he does get pretty pissed off at me. As far as their bite, at this size, it doesn't really feel like much. I mean, a little bit. Like, it is starting to get to that point where I can kind of feel it. Again, I had this guy since he was like this big, and now he's this big. But their bite as an adult is probably unpleasant, but again, just talking to people I know, it's really not as bad as certain creators on here make it out to be. Like, it will draw blood, but it's not gonna send you to the hospital or, you know, have you just freak out and yell. Like you can put the gloves down. It's not gonna kill you. But anyways, despite the reputation, I really do think that any animal can be socialized. It's just that some will require more work than others. This species, of course, being one that will require more work. So if you're looking at, you know, getting a pet for your kid, and you know that they're gonna want to play with it, probably not a Tokay gecko. If you want an animal that is gonna be handleable, like just from the jump, again, probably not a Tokay gecko. But if you are willing to put in the work to socialize them, I would highly recommend them. They're really not that bad, I think, but yeah, they're super cool. And if you want an animal that you just want as a display pet, Tokay gecko. That's gonna wrap up the care guide, everyone. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and found it informative. If you did, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. I would really appreciate it. If you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I will be more than happy to answer any and all questions related to Tokay geckos. Lastly, if you guys like Totodile, I do have some merch of him up in my spring store. The link will be down in the description below if you guys want to support your boy. But anyways, that's going to do it for today, guys. As always, thanks for watching and enjoy your reptiles.